Hello, everyone. Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief, DevOps.com, and we're here for another great DevOps webinar. Today's webinar is, I think, a great one that you're going to enjoy. It's brought to us by our sponsored today by IBM, and brought to us by our friends at IBM and Cisco. The title of today's webinar is Leveraging DevOps and Agile Development to Transform Your Application Testing Program. But really, this is a client case study on how Cisco themselves, using IBM and other tools, as well as Cisco's own culture, has really transformed their application testing program to become a world-class example of how to do app testing securely. So before we begin, though, I wanted to just take a moment, and for those of you who maybe have never joined a GoToWebinar, a DevOps.com webinar before this, let me briefly explain the GoToWebinar control panel. Got a couple of things that I want to point out to you. First of all, in your GoToWebinar control panel, there is a section for questions. If you hit the little caret or arrow to make it point down, you'll see that expand. We have set aside time for questions at the end of today's webinar, as well as we have, we'll be answering questions live as our panelists are presenting. So rather than putting your questions in chat, though, which can get a little messy, we're going to ask you that you type your questions into the question section of your control panel. This way they're queued, we have a record of them, and we'll do our best to answer as many of these as possible. If for some reason we have too many to answer, we will try to get to them offline and get answers to your questions. We encourage questions, and we want you to absolutely get answers. Secondly, we try to make these webinars as interactive as possible, and we will be asking several polling questions of our audience. However, the polling questions are only as good as your answers. They're easy questions, they're multiple choice, but if you don't answer them, we really don't get, not only we, but the whole audience doesn't get a lot out of it. So please take a few seconds, answer the question, and it'll make it better for everyone, including yourself. Finally, on the bottom of your control panel is the chat section. Here at our DevOps.com webinars, we use the chat section more if you have a technical issue, perhaps the slides aren't advancing or you're having problems hearing audio. We do have engineers standing by who will try to help you with any problem. If you'd like to, if you have a problem, just put it into the chat section. So questions go in questions, chat goes in chat, and with that, let's move on here. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is brought to us and my friends at IBM and presenting with Cisco system. Very lucky to have actually two powerhouse women who are really on top of their game here and have recently spoken, well, at least one of them, has spoken about this subject at IBM Interconnect, where it was one of the most popular sessions at the 3-day event. So with that being said, let me introduce you to our panel today. First, from IBM, we have Suchita Gupta, and Suchita is a senior software client architect and leader at IBM. And joining Suchita is Sona Srinivasan. Sona is a senior IT architect, global architecture and technology services IT at Cisco Systems. Ladies, welcome to DevOps.com webinars.
Thank you very much, Alan. We are both extremely excited to be here with you today. And welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world you're dialing in. Suchita and me are super excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, very excited to be part of this webinar.
Okay. All right. With that being said, let us move to the next slide. And so, guys, this is where we wanted to kind of kick it off. And obviously what we're going to be talking about today is a little or a lot about application security. And to give you all a sense of history of what we're seeing here is, look, just this past week with the WannaCry ransomware, and before that it was the Google Docs thing. But it seems a day or two doesn't go by where we hear about another high, another security incident of high visibility. But it goes beyond sort of your gut feeling. If you actually look at the numbers here, you can see the amount of records that have been breached and the types of incidents that we're seeing. We look down here at the bottom, percentage of breaches that are due to web attacks. This is a number that's probably growing. That may even be low, 40%. Almost a full year to detect the average APT, advanced persistent threat type of attack. And just the average breach, not the big ones, are over 30,000 records being breached. And each one of these data breach incidents is costing the average U.S. company $6.5 million. With some, you could add 2 zeros to some of those. By the way, this information you're seeing up here comes to us from the IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence, the Verizon Data Breach Report, and the Cost of Data Breach Report study, as you can see on the bottom. So these are numbers that are well grounded in research. So Shushita, what is the average person or the average security admin or developer or DevOps person? What can we do? What can we do? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you ladies, and I want to hear and learn.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. So as we get into this discussion, I'm just going to set up some context for today's interactive session here. As you see this slide, it's coming from X-Force Data Breach and Version Data Breach Investigation Report. This slide shows how the change in the application security threat landscape over the past 3 to 5 years. As you see, these application security threats are becoming very prominent over the years, and basically thanks to the explosion of web apps, mobile apps, and IoT apps. Right? So that's the landscape right now. So with this introduction, I would like to invite our key customer, Cisco, who leads in this application security space and DevOps space, using our flagship product, IBM AppScan Enterprise. So, and Sona Srinivasan has been the key architect behind the whole DevOps and continuous security and continuous delivery architecture here at Cisco. So we are very lucky to have her on the speaker today. And she is going to share her journey in the application security in the DevOps space here with us. So Sona, over to you.
Thank you, Suchita. Thank you, Alan. Folks, as you can see, this is a very important way to address the trends that's happening in the application security world. If those of you who have looked at the OWASP Top 10 for 2017, you'll see that there's a little bit of a shift. But we continue to have SQL injections and cross-site scripting to be the top 3 as well. So the application attack surface continues to be a target that everybody is after. It's the easiest and the obvious window to get into a lot of our breaches. At Cisco, our biggest goal is to make sure we don't show up on any of these charts. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing internally and how did we get started, right? So first, we had some conversations, and we continue to talk through some of our challenges in how we actually go from thinking about security as a gate just before release to something that we think about at every stage of our software development lifecycle. How much of static analysis do we do, right? And not to be confused between SonarQube and the security approaches, we do focus a little bit through this presentation on the security elements. So we also internally as a company have constantly been asked, how do we go fast? How do we make sure security doesn't slow us down? Because we have to compete. Cisco has to be extremely competitive in the market. So how do we actually go about addressing elements in our pipeline that help us go fast but securely? So we've been looking at even our user stories as we go from a waterfall to an agile world where we can glean the who, why, and what out from our simple user stories to give us security requirements. And most importantly, we're thinking about how do we actually think about security testing in every stage of the software development lifecycle. What is the right balance of running scans versus fixing vulnerabilities? How tough are we going to be in mandating these vulnerabilities get fixed right away? Because not every vulnerability is exploited today. However, none of us can go to sleep peacefully knowing very well that a known vulnerability was not fixed. So these were some of the conversations that we had. We've already had a DAS tool, which is IBM. We've had it for more than 8 years at Cisco, which has been a great success. But we've also introduced other techniques into our software development lifecycle, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So balancing the amount of security that we do in the development process has been something that we've constantly been thinking about and evolving towards. So with that, I'm going to pause for us to take a quick polling question. And Alan?
Yes, thank you. So here's our first polling question, everyone. And do you use both SAST and DAST tools in your development process? And for those of you maybe who are not familiar, Sona, do you want to just reiterate what does SAST and DAST stand for?
Absolutely. SAST is our static application security testing, which is done with several tools in the market. Some of us might be using a few of them or maybe even one of them. So we have tools like Coverity, Checkmarx, Clockwork, IBM AppScan Source, and we have Veracode. So there's a lot of SaaS tools out there in the market. So you can do this on source code, and hopefully most of you are doing it in your DevOps pipeline right after your Jenkins builds. And I'm hoping that you're doing it at 100% automation. The DAS technique is basically the dynamic black box testing tools. IBM continues to be the leader. Gartner publishes a list of our application security tools and where they rank. So there is HP Fortify, there is IBM AppScan Enterprise, there's Acunetics. So depending on what product you've chosen in your environment, hopefully you're using both. So do let us know what you think.
Okay, hopefully that explains it. We've got only about 50% voted. If the rest of you pick yes or no, it's kind of an easy question. We'll close voting off here in just another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and what are our sponsors for polling question 1, Deb? Share results. Okay, well, almost 2/3 are not using both SAST and DAST in their development process. I will tell you that not a surprise to me. I'm sorry. Sona, what is it a surprise to you, ladies?
Suchita and my jaw just dropped here simply because, we've been not privy to the world where neither of these tools are used in the development lifecycle. So I think hopefully those of you who don't use these tools will take back a lot of good information on how to implement as well as to leverage it in your DevOps pipeline. So I highly recommend that you guys pay attention and stay with us during the session because these are the easier ways in which we can do it. So our pen testers, when they eventually do reconnaissance and reverse engineering of our applications, have a lot of low-hanging fruit that has already been taken care of by some of these fabulous tools that are there in the market. So with that, I'm going to switch back to the slides.
Okay, your screen is up if you just go to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Alan.
There we go. Okay.
So with this, what we're going to do is I'm going to actually show you, sorry, my bad, how we actually went through this journey, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about what are these conversations we had, right? We were getting a lot of vulnerabilities detected, and we had a lot of pen testers that we were spending time with, and we wanted to fix our applications, and security is front and center for Cisco. It's a very, very important aspect of how we do things at Cisco in a software space, especially with everything that we touch. So we talked a little bit about the conversation. So here's where those of you who don't use these tools need to think about. First of all, do you know the vulnerability posture of your applications? So do a baseline of it. Find out what are your top issues in your applications. Are they SQL injections? Are they cross-site scripting? Are you detecting them at runtime, or are you detecting them at source? So those are some of these conversations you should continue to have. I think that was a great eye-opening polling question for me, Alan, so thank you very much. Next, I'm going to talk to you about how you can mature the continuous security process and not think of security as a one-stop during your journey. Instead, think of it at every stage of your journey, so it'll become second nature to your developers, and they're not technically stressed out when it comes to when they get measured towards release. The second topic is very interesting because, to me at least, where I'm going to tell you various ways in which you can do security continuously, right from your repos to your post-deployment data, and how you can pull them back all together and build some rich insights and intelligence into the way you actually develop your app. The third thing we're going to talk about in this presentation is also how do we go from simplification, automation, digitization. Cisco is going digital with everything we're doing today. We're digitizing our document signing techniques. We're digitizing our release process. We're trying to digitize our dynamic scanning techniques, right? So how do you really get into that digital world and then move to a machine learning state? And most importantly, how do you get to that often used buzzword of cognitive security? So we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do and what you can take away and implement in your team. And then we're going to talk about some of the vectors that we think about from a security perspective at Cisco, which goes beyond technology and tools. And last but not the least, I'm also going to give you a couple of high-level items for you to take back to your leadership and to your senior architects and discuss on how to adapt to threats and attacks together along with your partner ecosystem as well as your customers. So with that, we'll jump into the examples of continuous security itself. So think of the next 4 examples as in your Agile cycle as planning, development, testing, and deployment. So I'm going to tell you some of the ways that you can think about various techniques that you can use at the planning phase. So as you start planning and writing down requirements for your application, please make sure that you start using threat modeling. There are 2 tools out in the market to do this very effectively. There's a Microsoft one that uses spoofing and striding techniques, and then there's the Cisco tool as well that you can use. Spend time on modeling your threats. Spend time on how you actually design this application. What kind of identity and access controls is enough? Do you need to do 2-factor, or is multi-factor required, right? A lot of you might be using PingFed. Some of you might be using plain LDAP, right? So think of how you're designing and think of your application and model threats. So you're preparing proactively and you're thinking about being a good cop, knowing what the bad cop is thinking about. And then as you do Agile, and I'm hoping that you guys are writing user stories in Rally, you can always define the who, why, and what in your security features simply by looking at your user stories inside Rally. So as you actually write your user stories, you can find out what kind of role-based access controls you need. What are the user types and groups that you need? What kind of data are you sitting at? Hopefully all of you do a lot of data classification. Cisco, we have multiple tiers we have 9 classifications of data, and we actually tie them into the types of users as well. So hopefully you can document your security requirements and your design requirements very easily once you have clear and simple user stories. So your data classification is very, very key. Your assessments of the user stories are very key. So you don't have to do an additional step for security. You can take your same user stories and quickly pull out the security requirements. The other thing to think about when you're planning and provisioning the environment for your application development, you can maintain a repository about the application's attributes. Is it a web app? Is it a mobile app? Is it an IoT app? Or is it a hybrid app? Or is it a combination of all of these? Is that app going to have 3 personas? It's going to have a mobile presence, it's going to have a web presence, and probably also some integrations that it's going to do with some of the cloud apps that you have. So profiling your apps and maintaining a thorough repository of it will help you track the app through its life cycle from hire to retire. So hopefully you guys have gotten some inputs on how we actually at Cisco are thinking about our apps as we start in the planning phase, right? Suchita, I'm sure IBM as a big company like Cisco as well does similar stuff, right? Yeah. With that, we'll move into the next phase of our software development, which is about building and writing your code. So as you write a lot of automation and you use either Jenkins or you're using Puppet or whatever your automation mechanism for build automation is, you should start thinking about your code repositories. You will find nuggets of data and nuggets of gems that you can leverage to secure your applications within your code repositories. So as you write your code, make sure you're tagging it effectively. Make sure you're able to glean, design patterns that have been used by your developers within these code repos. For example, the singleton class is one of my favorite as well, a favorite design pattern as well, where you can actually see if there are singletons that are being used, how are the parameters that are defined within this construct being secured. Are you doing input validation on these? Are you doing input sanitization? Are you making sure the output is validated, right? So you can do a lot of preventive techniques as you understand the design patterns that your developers are doing, right? So the other thing that you can do, and as well as for myself as a developer, I like to think about what are my common challenges? Where do I, as a developer, need most training? Am I constantly writing, SQL injections? Am I constantly writing cross-site scripting? And what kind of training should I take for me to write better and secure code? Similarly, look at the way your branching patterns are emerging. Are you writing modular code? Are you dealing with legacy code that you're kind of restructuring? Are you moving Java code to Angular and Node? Or are you rewriting something with Python? So a lot of the trends and the vulnerability behaviors of developers can be understood when you actually look at your code. And if you actually maintain a nice little dashboard, so Cisco has a fabulous dashboard called Continuous Delivery Analytics, which has a security element as well that shows us which application, which sub-branch has which developers contributing to it, and what are the security issues we're seeing at each branch level. So we can help those developers proactively. Instead of sending everybody to a generic class, we're trying to focus on things where people need the most help. Because if people are doing a great job, it's the best time to tap into one of them and help train the others as well. And you can write common security libraries that can be leveraged and used within your builds as well. The choice of language is something, again, that you can understand from understanding your code repos. Technically, we've seen a lot more cross-site scripting and SQL injection issues in our Java repos than we have with Angular and Node. So choosing the language framework as your design becomes a lot more exciting when you have insights into what your patterns are. And you can make the right decisions for your companies as well. So with that, I'm happy to take questions as they come in as well, so you don't have to wait till the end of the presentation. I'd like for this to be live and interactive, so hopefully you guys can, throw in some questions at me as well. So we just talked about things that we could do at the planning phase, which is about threat modeling, and then we talked a little bit about, what we can do at the design level. Now we're going to talk about our testing phase. So as we get into, so we've already run some, let's say, some static analysis on our source code, and we've fixed them at the code level. Now we've spun up the application as an executable on one of our VMs, right? And we're beginning our DAS testing. So we need to make sure before we start doing our black box testing that some of the quality bugs have been fixed. If possible, if all of the quality bugs have been fixed, would be better, right, Suchi? Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend that you guys think about, your prerequisites to your DAS testing. Is your DAS environment where you're testing very, very close to production, right? Is it highly resilient? Is it very, very similar to production in the way that it would recover from an attack? Is it within the DMZ? Is it within your core zone of your data center? Is it on the cloud? Is it, does it have a path profile that you can look into? Because very often what you do in the DAS phase could define how fast you go within your continuous delivery pipeline. So not everybody looks at DAS with the same attachment as they do when they look at things that go with speed. So even with automation, there are a lot of factors that you need to think about, right, Suchita?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So actually, Sona brought up a really good point here at this point, that when Cisco was running into a lot of DAST speed issues while setting up this benchmark for the continuous delivery, so IBM did a sizing and capacity planning exercises to help them achieve this one. And during this exercise, actually, IBM product also has improved and came a long way along, right? So the point is, here we are not only setting up what they want to achieve, as well as what's going to come in the roadmap. Like we're just being proactive, like the stuff Sona just mentioned about the developers' behavior, finding those patterns. Like so, we are just trying to do a lot of research and experiment right now, me and Sona, on how we can find out those patterns, what we can write. So that kind of partnership we are talking about here, and yeah. So let's Sona talk after that. Yeah.
Thank you, Suchita. I highly think that we have to learn together in the security space. No one product or no one vendor or no one person has all the solutions. I'm sure the breaches and the attacks coming out every day shows all of us in the security space to be extremely humble. I really think that also understanding your environment in terms of network latency, in terms of your application's behavior. Suchita knows that when we moved to one of our new environments for our cloud area is called lightweight application environment, we saw a lot of issues with our DAS scans running slower. Of course, there's network latency issues that we factored and we sort of planned with our network teams on it, but we also understood that the bottom layers of the compute storage and network contribute to how quickly an application recovers as well from an attack. The graceful recovery of an application under attack is as important as a feature that makes the application fancy, right? So this is another way of how you can think about your DAS capabilities and think about it continuously and benchmark it. You can say an application with 6 pages when tested with this tool at pre-deployment was run within the next 5 hours. So you can benchmark. So if things are going slower, you can find out what are those issues.
Correct. We actually spend a lot more time on benchmarking than actually release itself. So planning was the most important part of it, and benchmarking, as Sona is emphasizing on that part, is pretty key to success.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the 4th stage of our software development lifecycle, especially the Agile world. I'm sure as all of you transition from waterfall to Agile, you'll have these things that you can bake into your system and think about. So for example, how do you think about what you did and how did you govern your SAST, DAST areas? How much of information do you have about your code reports on what are the open source elements? How did you profile your apps? Do you know if they're hybrid, if they're on-prem, if they're in the cloud? Hopefully you have a aggressive application registry that you're leveraging, and it also has the software composition within there. So open source has become the best way to build applications fast today, but you also have to keep in mind the security nuggets that go into using open source elements. The output of your pen test should help you figure out how this application is going to behave in production and when you ship it out to the customer and in the customer's environment. Similarly, when you've done deployment, and especially as an IT house, we try to maintain the security posture of our applications, the data it houses, and the environment, whether it's on-prem or in our cloud. So tying all of these elements into how you design your application is really what you can do with your post-deployment and your pre-deployment data. So keep an eye on both of these, and as a security developer or even as an architect, please factor these two in and constantly use that to change and evolve the design of your applications. Yeah? Yeah?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes, Sona, that was a lot of information to digest here. While we pop up these polling questions, Sona, if you might want to take a look in the questions section. Maybe there's some quick ones.
Yes, absolutely. I will do just that.
Okay, so our next polling question is a follow-up to the first one. If you are using either static or dynamic application testing tools here, how many, or what percentage of them would you say are automated? And let's call it 30% or below, 30 to 50%, 70 to 50%, or totally automated. And I realize, not everyone maybe fits into this bucket, but pick the bucket that's closest to where you are. And we'll ask you again if you can just answer quickly so we can move along. We'll close up voting here in just another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and our results, here we are. So over half of the people picked 30% or below. About a third picked about 50%. I guess you're allowed to pick more than one because okay. 8% at 70% and only 4% or 100%. Ladies, is that kind of what you see in the field a lot, or is that surprising to you?
I think this isn't surprising given where different companies are in their journey, Alan. It's about how they're actually transitioning to DevOps, right? So it's about, have they taken the DevOps plunge just yet? Are they using build automation? Because it starts really there, right? Using Artifactory, using Jenkins, and how much of time and people do they have dedicated to their tooling and platform and technology? So all of these kind of factor into the levels of automation. But today, it is in everybody's benefit to automate as much as possible, especially for security. So the job of running the scan isn't something that your developers have to do, and that way they can spend more time fixing as well as designing better solutions.
Yeah, so especially the static analysis piece, so that should go first when it comes to the automation.
Today, 90% of the static analysis tools out in the market do integrate with your DevOps pipeline. All of them come with APIs and scripts that you can use and write wrappers around or implement natively. Jenkins today supports a plethora of static analysis tools with plugins. So there's a lot of opportunity out there to automate.
Correct. Yeah.
So that way your developers are really being leveraged for the design, so they can spend more time on features, they can spend more time on the security elements rather than the mundane tasks of running it.
Yeah.
So this way, if you're a small organization that doesn't have the ability to scale up for a lot of investment in people, automation is your best friend.
Correct.
So you can choose your tiger team, train them, automate, and you can actually do this so you're not skipping the security step because you don't have the resources.
Correct. And that helps in making security as a second nature for developers. It's not a extra mundane process for them. It should be very obvious and part of the ecosystem for them.
And once you start automating it, right, your next maturity question would be, how much of it are you fixing? So that's where the training and the knowledge of building your developers and increasing their maturity and skill set in the security space becomes really key. So this is again a very interesting poll. Thank you all for providing answers. It's very insightful to Suchita and me to observe what's happening outside. Yeah.
That gives us a lot of insight as well. Yeah.
So Alan, with your permission, shall I go on?
Yes. Yes, slides are on. Go ahead. Please.
All right. So this is a bit of an eyeball chart, but it is probably the most useful slide in my deck, as per my opinion, because this really shows you what a DevOps pipeline looks like. So at Cisco, we are evolving from a single pipe where we push all our applications to it to hit every single tool in the pipeline, to a little bit more of an intelligent DevOps pipeline, where the application profile defines which tools and technology we need to hit as we progress through our software development lifecycle. So if none of you have implemented, I'm sure most of you have, but if some of you are in the process of thinking of how to transition into a DevOps world, kindly do spend some time looking at this slide, because it might give you some ideas on what to stick into your world and what kind of tools to put in from a security perspective in your DevOps pipeline. So I'm going to walk you through 6 of these lines, which are pretty much workflows if you want to think of it that way. So we've broken our applications itself into 3 types: cloud apps, apps that are built on-prem, and apps that are bought, right? And when you actually think about apps that are built internally within our company at Cisco, we use our Artifactory and our Git buckets very extensively for repo management. And then we use Jenkins for our build automation. We use SonarQube, Selenium, and Oaths for our QA. And we use Checkmarx a lot for our SAST. And it's all completely automated. So the first 4 steps are completely automated. Our DAST is also in the process of being completely automated through our release pipeline. And we use udeploy and urelease as well at Cisco for deployment. And we're trying to automate the DAST scan within the udeploy urelease workflow. Of course, pen testing can never be automated because till the robots decide how to get into our heads and be little bots running around doing pen testing, which is obviously a future opportunity, pen testing is manual and we continue to keep it that way. And we get a lot of good feedback on our design as well as our application posture. And then we do post-deployment management with our Splunk, with AppDynamics, with our incident management repo, our network systems. We do a lot of quality scanning as well. And we feed all of that data back into our metrics dashboard, which we pretty much aggressively follow. And it's tied very tightly to our application portfolio. So we know where our critical apps are and what their security posture looks like. So similarly, if we're building a mobile app in-house, mobile follows a similar pattern of Jenkins automation or any build automation that could be custom even through a script. It goes through our rigorous QA and static analysis, but we're also in the process of bringing back a binary analyzer which will actually look for things that are injected at the binary level, because for mobile, static analysis is not enough and dynamic alone cannot catch this as well. So our .ipa and .apk files for Android and iOS are going to go through this rigor as well. And deployment for mobile is not tool specific. It's very custom based on the type of apps we build. But we try to make sure that when we cut the certificate for that mobile app, we know what its posture looks like. So again, pen testing is an effective way. We try to set it up in our labs, deploy it on our mobile apps, jailbreak, and all of that good stuff we do. And we also try to keep a track of how many users are using our mobile applications, what type of users, what type of data do we house within them to sort of minimize our surface attack exposure. The same thing I would say if you move down to the web apps that are bought. You obviously don't have source code to them. So we actually do manage where we house them, and we do QA on them, right? We test feature functionality before we push it into production. And DAST becomes extremely important, which is where we've had a lot of success with IBM AppScan Enterprise, where we've been able to cover both apps built at Cisco as well as packaged apps where we don't have access to source code to look for the OWASP top 10. So we are a very, very big OWASP shop. So we do a lot of DAST testing. And the interesting thing with the DAST tool is your false positive percentages are way, way, way lower than your SaaS tools out in the market. So it's an effective way to check applications that are bought as well from a security posture perspective before you deploy. And of course, again, whether it's built in-house or bought, we use our deployment tools, urelease and udeploy. And we also have stuff for our custom ERP solutions. So we have a deployment platform that has 3 or 4 tools in there. And then we, of course, pen test even the bot applications. And we go back and discuss with our Oracles, with our IBMs, what are the issues that we found and what we'd like for them to fix and patch before the next version. And again, we do post-deployment management through our various monitoring tools. And we do feed them back into our dashboard as well. The same thing with mobile apps that we buy. We cannot do static analysis on them. So we start with the binary executable management, which is pretty much your binary analyzer. We do QA, and then of course we do our DAST on it as well, and we deploy and we continue to pen test. So the flow is very similar for the bottom 2 categories, apps built and apps bought. And now we'll talk a little bit about our cloud apps, which are a little bit more different in the sense of we need to track beyond just the source code. We need to know what container they're sitting on. So we use tools like Quay, and we use our own in-house built tool called NORAD, which monitors these container images, figures out what kind of Docker hubs that we are touching, and who has access to them. And obviously the statefulness and the state of the application is something we're maintaining. This is a space that's growing fast and furiously, and Cisco is going from being a traditionally very paranoid company and keeping everything on-prem to more and more of a cloud user. Yeah, that's a big journey for us. Suchita knows, because every time we get a solution that's out in the cloud, we go in a panic mode and we say, no, we're not moving anything into the cloud, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So it's very, very important to think about your cloud management, because it's like giving your kids a car and trusting them to drive it right, and being safe. So cloud management is very
important, and the security is the key, basically. Whenever we have any, or you as a customer, you have any desire to go on the cloud or a need to go to cloud, the security comes the first thing. So that's a pretty key and very important point here.
Keep in mind that IBM has a fabulous development environment called Bluemix. Cisco insisted that we have a dedicated cloud because that's how paranoid we are, and we refused to use the public cloud for a long time. So even the controls and the requirements that Cisco requires a cloud provider to meet have to match with the security posture of those services. So what kind of data do you glean when you actually do logging and monitoring of your cloud platform? So all of those requirements, we have a process at Cisco called Casper that our InfoSec organization tightly manages. But again, we tie it back to our security dashboards, and we make sure that we keep our eye on everything that's happening there. And we do a lot of segmentation, especially with inbound traffic. Again, APIs, another booming area. We have close to, I don't even know if our number of APIs are in the couple of thousands or more. We use MuleSoft. We use, we're now building out something called a unified API management platform, specifically for our API management. So even that platform goes through extensive security rigor, especially when we discuss role-based access controls, the privileges of an admin who's using that API repository to make sure we can avoid man-in-the-middle attacks, make sure we can avoid elevation of privileges attacks. So the pipeline of how you develop and deploy becomes significantly important. So think of how you're architecting your pipeline. And once you know what kind of application it is, for example, if I'm a bot mobile app, I don't need to be going through every single tool in the DevOps pipeline. So this is where your DevOps pipeline shrinks and expands based on what you know about the application.
Actually, I just want to add one point. I really like this slide. Sona has created this slide, and it helped us as well, because it really indicates and help you what exactly you need to do in terms of achieving what is the continuous delivery pipeline is, and how you're going to inject the whole continuous security in this pipeline. So this is the perfect slide which makes you think and make sure all the components required to achieve that continuous CI/CD pipeline, and make sure the security is the part of that pipeline from beginning to the end. This is the perfect slide for that purposes.
So keep in mind as we go through, thank you, Suchita, that I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, and seeing this will actually help also our partners like IBM and Checkmarx understand where we really want to go more from an automation perspective as well. So again, we have a lot of things to think about constantly about how do we simplify this? How do we make our developers' experience fabulous so that they won't shy away from using these tools and technologies? How much of it can we automate so that we don't really have to wait for somebody to manually run it, so this is effective and we go fast? So with that, did we see any questions, Alan, coming in?
Yes, Sona, my apologies. I realized you weren't able to see the questions
Yes.
section, but I believe you should now. I just made you, gave you additional priority. So we have a number of questions. Do you see them, Sona, in the question section now?
Yes, because I'm just catching them now. I think somebody had asked, how does this security item matter with today's topic? So
well, no, that was long gone. Yeah, no, we
okay.
that was sort of. Let me give you one, Sona, if you don't mind. That I'd like you to hit on this, and this is it's kind of classic, right?
Sure.
Tarzan writes, this DevOps stuff super exciting. However, as a DevOps in a big bank, the difficulty that I'm facing is how to convince people to adopt DevSecOps. Developers are just focusing on their future development. Managers are trying to catch the due dates of the projects. And as usual, security is on the very, very down low of the list. How do you cope with this? Amen, Safik, first of all. I think that's a common lament of all security people. But Sona, what advice can you give Safik and the audience?
So I think it's, so this is always an excellent question because we battle this out every day with our leadership, especially when we go back and ask for funding, right? And with prioritizing security. The cost of actually fixing a bug when it's into production, especially when it's a security bug, goes up by 5 times as opposed to when you fix it at development. So the trade-off of fixing it early and starting left is so high that, it should be easier, right, for people to think about how can we proactively do this rather than be reactive. You shouldn't have to wait for a breach. If you talk to Yahoo CISOs or if you talk to anybody who's been breached in the recent past, they will tell you that they're paying for the technical debt of having not done security very aggressively, right? So I think those conversations are very, very critical. And as you do embed security into your development pipeline, do it incrementally. Do it one thing at a time. Start showing value with inserting one tool in. Try to make sure it's automated, right? So it's not a question of, waking up one day and saying, I'm going to find nirvana about all of the security stuff. But it's about showing how much cleaner your code bases have gone after you've injected a SaaS tool into it. And injecting technology alone isn't enough. You need to have a process and governance about it, so you're effectively getting credit for keeping your application secure, as well as you have a thorough process on how to handle exceptions. How do you handle languages that these tools don't address? Are there other techniques? Because keep in mind, security is not just for the security CISSPs or for the InfoSec team. Security is for everybody who owns that app. There should be a sense of pride within the developer for writing quality code, which includes a very big component of security.
Absolutely. One other quick question, and then we can move along. This one is for Shuchita, and it's really specific to AppScan. When using AppScan Enterprise, when running an automated DAST scan, do you run it in the automatic scan mode or manually record, if you know?
So, the way it is, we have got both solutions, both ways to do the AppScan Enterprise, manual as well as automated, as this solution comes both on-prem and on the cloud as well now, and both deployment of AppScan Enterprise and dynamic application scanning has actually manual as well as automated part of it as well. As far as the automated part goes, it can be both ways. As one which comes with the product and it just works. There's some configuration settings in there and that works. Other ways, if you already have your own DevOps pipeline already set up and you've got different tools, we have got a plugins and different integration points to make your AppScan automated and integrated with your DevOps pipeline. So the way Cisco is trying to do right now, they have got IBM you deploy, you release as a DevOps pipeline, continuous delivery pipeline right now, and we have integrated and developed a plugin actually which helps in automating the AppScan with you deploy, you release. So there are many ways to do this one, and it comes as a default as well.
Excellent.
And this product has improved, right, Alan? And I can tell you from Cisco's point of view, when we first started using the DAS tool, we didn't automate it because, automating a security tool isn't an easy skill set. So literally this automation request and the plugin that IBM continues to work and evolve on is a requirement from a customer like Cisco. Because for us, we do want to go faster. We absolutely want to go faster. So IBM has to keep up, which is where sharing of roadmaps and architectures and what we want to do is very, very critical. So they've adapted to the fact that, we're not just a Java shop, right? And I love the questions on the, the panel especially, where this person has said that developers do not focus on their future, do not have time to focus on security because they're talking about features. This is where automation really, really helps, right? So I think please continue to have these conversations. Make sure you can improve it. I'm also going to quickly field one more question, which I think is very relevant to keeping me completely honest. Somebody said, what would you do differently, if you had to start over, right? I'm not saying we by any means are perfect at Cisco. We have learned it the hard way that we cannot not have a solution for static. Right? The number of exceptions that we had for our DAS tool was growing, which is why we introduced static. Similarly, as we introduce static, a detection technique alone is not enough. We need to have a preventive technique, which is why we introduced using safe libraries. And if any of you are on OAuth, please use ESAPI, right? Check for those secure libraries that you can leverage. So what would I do differently, right? I would hopefully have the wisdom that I have now, maybe previously 3-4 years ago, and convinced my leadership to make these investments and go faster rather than the speed at which we're able to go as a big company. So what would I do differently? I would have introduced static analysis way before. I would have probably, had this conversation about automation of the DAS tool with IBM way before, right? And I would have also spent a lot of quality time getting my developers to get comfortable with security concepts as a part of their DNA rather than think about it once we start detecting, right? So prevention is always better than cure. So thank you for that great question, and that's a question I always think about pretty much every time we do planning and what our platform should look like in the future.
Okay, let's move along because we're only 8 minutes from the top of the hour.
Sure. So this slide is basically a summary of what we talked about in the previous one. So where I'm actually telling you how you can stop thinking about your DevOps pipeline. So these 6 bars in the center is what we saw drill down off in the previous slide. So as you start provisioning your application, as you see developers pulling, Xcode into their environments or using, a certain type of, development tools and platforms and IDEs, start planning your application profiling, right? Use that to pick the choice of your pipeline and start monitoring your post-deployment posture and feed it back. Have the post-deployment incident team have a conversation with your application teams. Don't keep them separate. The true journey of DevOps comes together when we can all constructively talk about what we need to improve without being on the defense. So this is one slide that I would highly recommend people think about. With that, we'll quickly pause for a poll question.
Yep, and this is our last polling question of the day. And it's what type of apps do you or your organization build? And you can select just one of these if you can, but you'll see they're kind of multiple themselves. Mobile apps, web apps, IoT apps, maybe web and mobile apps, or maybe all 3. Again, please, we're kind of short on time, so if you can vote, and this way we can share the results with our audience. We'll close things off here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, survey says, well, web and mobile leads the list with almost 40%, 39. Mobile, web, and IoT are just right behind that with about 1/3. And then web apps alone at 1/4. Interestingly, only 2% do mobile apps only and only 2% do IoT apps only. Ladies, what do you think?
I think this is exactly what's happening, Alan. There's going to be an explosion of web and mobile apps, but IoT is probably going to push us off by 2020. So we definitely need to start thinking about binary analysis as well. So to your question on the person who asked, what would I do differently? I know mobile and binary is going to become front and center. So I'm going to try to see if I can get my leadership to continue to invest in that space and have tighter controls around that as we get into more of a mobile and IoT kind of company.
Having said that, just a quick comment here. Actually, IBM investment is also, when we are thinking about a roadmap, it comes for app scan. So the portfolio we have right now, we have got source, static, dynamic, and now we have got very robust mobile app scan as well. So we are just trying to make the whole pipeline building right now. The customer gets all sorts of coverage here for all these applications when it comes to scanning. So to your point, Sona, here, yeah, that's correct. Like IBM is also investing a lot right now in research and development when it comes to mobile applications and IoT applications, as well as making the web applications robust, as well as scanning robust as well. Yeah.
And as we quickly go to the next slide, I will field one more quick question. Somebody, I believe a gentleman or a person called Shibu had asked this question on, are we embedding Bava Qualys into our release? Absolutely. IT is in the process of automating Bava scans, either from Jenkins or from our own, you release, you deploy setup to actually automate this process. Qualys, of course, runs on the network, and it's not something that we tie in, and it's continuously running, so it's not a one-time run. So that will continue to be the way it is today. So with that, I'm also going to tell you a little bit about this slide, which is about continuous security at Cisco. We continue to learn how to improve ourselves, but we look at security from a three-pronged approach. We look at our people and skill set, we look at our technology automation, and we look at our governance capabilities. So we highly watch the market, and we saw the survey also tell us how our mobile and IoT apps are going to be booming. And we also keep our eyes on our past changes, like the cloud evolutions. What is Amazon doing? What is Azure got in terms of security controls as our partners offer solutions to us in these environments as well? We also look at our people skill set where we're trying to do an in-context training approach as opposed to an on-demand. So we're not sending people to webinars. Instead, we're sending them to the tool itself to learn it on the fly, and we're building bots around it. And of course, we're also trying to help people understand that governance isn't the only team that needs to worry about it. So we're bringing the policies to the user with reminders proactively as alerts as they start planning. So 25% into the project, we send a reminder saying your project is coming up for a release and we need you to run your DAS scan. So this is kind of what we're doing at Cisco. With that, I'm going to quickly walk you through how we're working on reducing our process complexity, because as a big company, we're very, very tightly tied up in processes, and how to increase your developer skill set. So identify areas in your process that you can simplify before you automate. A refinement of your process and your technology and how you can actually make it more relevant to your developer is the best way to start. So spend a lot of time simplifying. We continue to try that, and it continues to be a challenge for us as a big company, but areas where we have simplified, we found automation to be way more successful. So automation is effective when the process is simple and when your developer skill set starts to mature. Because if a person doesn't even know how to set up a scan manually, they're not going to know how to fix issues when they run into a scan failed issue, right? And then we're more and more going into a digitized world, and my friends in the release team will tell you, we have been very, very manual with things being in siloed systems. Now we're getting the systems to talk to each other, send data to each other. So we're literally pixelating our artifacts between the systems. So we're going more into a digitized world as well. We have a lot of opportunity in the machine language space. Like I told you, we house about 2 to 3 terabytes of just our dynamic scanning data, and pretty close for our static analysis data as well, for just about 400 applications. And we would like to apply a lot of our algorithms like k-means to see the various trends that we see between these two data sets. So we're continuing to apply machine learning, and I can tell you we gave a lot of good feedback to one of our vendors, Checkmarx, where we saw a huge amount of false positives, and they have come a long way between their version 7 and version 8 by applying machine language. IBM also has now introduced a solution called IFA, which is similar in helping with false positive analysis. So you don't have to hire or have a security person doing your false positive analysis for you. And then, of course, everybody's talking about Mr. Watson and the cognitive capabilities. We are hoping that we will put Watson to the test as well as we get ready for it with our cognitive APIs, but you cannot get there without doing the previous 4 steps. You cannot glean predictive intelligence from your data sets if you don't know your data sets. If you haven't simplified it, you're not going to get that much value. So our journey to cognitive has been this way, and we continue to learn, but our biggest values have come from reducing process complexity and increasing our developer skill set. We continue to do that.
Excellent.
I just want to add just a quick point here. Cisco has really done a great job in just setting up the very simple processes here around application security and moving on to automation successfully. And actually that is helping them in moving to the cognitive security solution. And we are actually doing co-research right now and co-development in that space, how we can have the cognitive security and the application security landscape. So well done. Thank you.
So to bring all the points we talked about today in today's webinar is basically to share with you how to manage risk holistically. You obviously need to manage your technology ecosystem, right? You need to have good analytics and dashboards that give you a comprehensive view into what your surface attacks look like for you to even minimize it. And to the great questions, you got to manage vulnerability both top-down where leadership prioritizes it and helps you design more secure applications, as well as the developer proactively doing it with a sense of urgency as well as pride. And always remember your application is your front door to your attacks, and you should absolutely be managing that front door. So like a ninja, you're protecting the door. Sometimes the door could be on the roof. So constantly think about, is the door just the front door or is the window also a door? So your application has to be managed and monitored. At Cisco, we also have an extensive security program called the Cisco Dojo, where there are different levels of security skill set that we encourage, and we give people stripes for it. So with that, I'm going to share with you a couple of key resources and hand it over back to Alan.
Thank you,
all
Sona.
of you got a lot of information from us and found it useful. Thank you so, so much.
Sona, thank you so much. Sushita, thank you so much. More information than I can process, but the good news is, look, the slides as well as the recording of this webinar will be available on DevOps.com and DevOps TV, our YouTube channel, within 24 hours. We have all of the questions. Sona, Sushita, we'll get you the questions that we didn't answer, and we have the people who asked them, and we'll get those out to them as well, hopefully. But for now, I'm sorry we ran over. I really try not to. I apologize, but I felt it was worthwhile. Sona, Sushita, thank you so much. Let's have you back on again, and we can go a little deeper next time.
Absolutely. Folks, please feel free to email me. I'll put my information in the chat session as well. I'm happy to field your questions and share with you what I know. I would definitely, please keep the dialogue and let me know if there are things that we can do differently as well. We want feedback. Thank you so much, Alan, for having Suchita and me today.
Thank you, Alan. And as Sona said, it's a collaboration. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. All right.